Hey everybody, this is Deji.
And Chris.
On today's episode, we talk with Billy Gleeson about getting your start in television, being a jack of all trades, and how sleeping in your car sometimes ain't that bad. Well, let's get into it. Hey, so we have Billy Gleeson here, who is a producer for a lot of things that you might actually know about. So, for those people who don't know who you are, the growing small number day by day who don't know who you are, Billy, just give them the sides.
That's very flattering. I don't know. People in this industry forget very quickly, don't they? So
This is true.
I might need to remind a few. No, I'm Billy Gleeson. I've worked in the industry for about 15 years now in various different capacities. I actually started out in news, in local news, and then got into comedy and then sports and then comedy again. And now I'm in sort of comedy and sports and got this weird mix, but I'm someone who I always wanted to work in that entertainment side of things, just making the days easier on everybody however I can. So right now I work as a producer at Nickelodeon on our show NFL Slimetime, which has been an absolute blast. We're actually just starting up our 4th season right now.
Awesome.
Many people may have heard of the show. If you haven't heard of the show, you may have heard of the SpongeBob SquarePants Super. I'm glad. But the last season we did the SpongeBob SquarePants Super Bowl thing, which I think a lot of people really felt like, whoa, hang on, what is this? And why haven't I heard of it yet? Because, Nickelodeon still has that sort of like kids thing. And I think that sort of really bridged us into a lot of adults being like, whoa, I would watch this. And that's like, that's great. That's what we're here to do. Come on, come all. So I work in the industry there, but I've worked at many a fantastic show in this wonderful industry. So that's the short version.
That's awesome. Your credits are very long. And so
that's just because I'm wordy. That's the only reason why. And then that's it.
Yeah, and others aren't. Mine is short. I'm kidding. No,
concise.
Sure, that's a good. They're very concise and to the point.
Yeah.
Not these other people who've got these credits, a mile long.
You're just showing off. You're showing off.
Yeah.
Come on. Jeez.
When did you sort of realize that producing, of all things, in this crazy business was the thing that you actually wanted to do?
I would say producing specifically fairly late, because in the very, very beginning, I actually wanted to be an animator. That was my dream.
Oh, wow.
I grew up not just loving cartoons the way so many of us did, but almost, studying cartoons. I was obsessed with how they did it. And I grew up very much a child of the 90s where we really saw that transition from the 2D Disney World into the Pixar and the 3D, and this just mind-blowing transition of entertainment that I'll never forget. And I remember the feeling of like, that's what I want to do. That's what I want to make. And I was the kid who even watched those, the DVD extras with all how they did like the underwater effect in Finding Nemo, and how they made every hair on Sully move in Monsters, Inc. and all that. And it just fascinated me. And I always wanted to do that. And so when I got through high school, secondary school in the UK, and still knew this is what I wanted to do, I was applying to a bunch of places. And I was fortunate enough that my dad, at that point, lived on the West Coast of America. And I thought to myself, you know what, I've got a chance here. I could stay in the UK, or I could go to West Coast America. And to a lot of kids working in the UK, like that's huge. You go to the West Coast, you're near Hollywood. It's like, that's it if you've got the opportunity to go over there. So I went to the University of Washington in Seattle, which has a great computer sciences program and stuff that I thought, this would be a really cool place to do it. During my time there, it was so computer science heavy, and I was so far behind the curve because like Bill Gates has funded half that school. Like we are talking like Microsoft crazy school, people coming from all over the world, a lot of people from like East Asia and stuff who have been studying code for years and years and years. And I'm brand new to it. And so I was playing catch up the whole time to all these people who are just whizzes on computer science. So at some point, I kind of had to make a call and say, I want to do this. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this. And I kind of had almost a mini breakdown because I'd flown halfway across the world to do this thing that I dreamed of doing my whole life, and had to accept I probably wasn't going to do that anymore. I got a terrible grade in a class. I will say it on here. I got a 1.4 in like the class I needed to like do well in, because I messed it up so bad. And I still tried so hard, but just completely bombed in this class. And so I had to make a call. Had a breakdown, was kind of talking with family members, and they said, well, you know, you've always loved performing and stuff. How about like drama? How about theater? And I was like, sure. I mean, I'll take one of those classes just as a fill-in while I'm figuring out what's going on. And then I took that and immediately loved it. And it wasn't, oh, I love the attention of performing and all that sort of stuff. I want to be an actor. Not really. It was more, I love putting on a show. I love putting together a show. So how can I do this more? Like, what facets of it do I love? So I started studying like every little piece of how you make a show. You know, I took classes in lighting to learn more about how we do that. I took, of course, acting classes, but you know, I was learning about every little piece of how you make a show. And when it was another family member kind of sat me down and said, like, well, what kind of show would you want to work on, you know, if it's not animation? And I said, well, I've always loved comedy, and I've always been obsessed with late night, and I had been for all my life. I'd love late night, but it was sort of like Disneyland to me. Like, there are people that work at Disneyland, but you don't think about the fact that there are people that work at Disneyland. You just go to Disneyland to have fun. I was watching late night shows because it was fun. And so someone said to me, you know, why don't you apply for an internship at a late night show? And it's like, yeah, people do that. People make that. And I loved making comedy. And so I loved writing comedy. And that's what I wanted to do. I kind of became a stand-up comedian after that. Oh, wow. And still do it. I love doing stand-up comedy. But in all the years I then started working in the business after that, you know, I always wanted to write. And I still do a lot of writing. I love writing. But it was actually a writer in the industry who sat me down once, and he was talking to me about my ambitions and where I hope to be. And he said, like, you seem more like a producer. You talk more like a producer, like bringing the whole vision together rather than just focusing on writing. I was like, I never thought about it like that. He's like, that's what you do. And maybe that's what you need to pursue. So that's kind of how it happened, in a very long story to get there. I wanted it for a long time, but it was sitting in the back of my brain. And I don't think I realized, oh, that's what you are. You're not a writer. You're this, or you are a writer to some degree, but you're the one that you like bringing all the pieces together.
It's interesting that you had this sort of vision of what you wanted, right? And then reality hits you, and and then you're like, oh, well, what is going on? Then somebody was able to like sort of see in you what you were not able to really see in yourself. And I think that's nice to have that outside perspective, looking at you, seeing your talents, where your interests lie.
It's kind of, to me, it was a bit like, you know, when you got that friend who's in a toxic relationship, like they can see what you want maybe isn't the right fit, but you can't see it when you're in it. You've convinced yourself for years, this is the person I want to be with. This is the thing I want to do. And then that person, that friend kind of grabs you and says, okay, I'm saying this because I love you. Is she the right one? And you're like, wait a minute. Maybe. Yeah, she has cheated on me 5 times. Why am I still doing this? So it was that feeling of it taking someone else with an outside perspective coming in to just massage you through it.
I feel like in the entertainment industry, that's pretty common. You find that a lot. I've heard so many stories like that because it's like this industry is so like mystical and like my dream has always been this. I want to do this. You know what I mean? And so it's always like, you're so focused on that thing and you're going for it and you're going for it. And even if you're the worst thing ever, you're still going for it. And sometimes it just takes a swift kick in the behind just to understand like, oh, I actually like, I'm good at this and like this more.
Yeah.
Wow. Because there's so much in this industry, such a wide like bandwidth of things you can do. So
definitely. And I think I'm the sort of person as well. I'm very grateful for having all those different paths and all those different things that I've done to this point. I'm very, very grateful for that because the further I've gone in this industry, I've realized, as we've all seen in recent years, the amount of things that change, the amount of pieces of media that go away and something new comes in, that honestly, if you are, not to sound so crass about it, but if you are a one-trick pony, you really could be in trouble. Like if your division on a job goes away, or they turn what 20 people did into what 2 people did because of AI and all the fun things that are coming through right now, it gets very, very scary, and you realize you've gone a long way in the game and you may be heading towards your role becoming obsolete at some point. And so I'm very, very grateful that in all the shows I've worked on and all the positions I've had, I've been able to kind of learn so many different pieces of how it all works and not kind of be stuck in a box.
This episode is brought to you by the FreeMe app. FreeMe is a crew time card job tracking app designed by film professionals for film professionals to help support the individual crew member. With FreeMe, you can easily see your work history, log your times, automatically calculate your gross wages, and much more.
Wait, but does it calculate overtime and meal penalties? Because sometimes I don't even know how to calculate that.
Yeah, it sure does. Both union and non-union. And when you're done with the job, you can export an invoice within seconds, all on your phone.
That's crazy. Because as a non-union independent contractor, I've always been curious, what if I wanted to charge for a union wage? What if I do become union? So that's really cool. So you're telling me that I don't have to log onto my computer after a 12-hour day and figure out my calculations for my time card?
Nope, you definitely don't. FreeMe does that all right there on the app.
How do I sign up, DG?
You can get FreeMe now for 25% off the annual price with our code FreeMeLot1. Again, that is FreeMe, LOT, the number 1, to get 25% off your annual subscription. Offer valid for the App Store only. That's how you can get it, and hopefully all your problems will be solved.
I want to dig in on that a little bit because I want to bring this up for regular listeners. You may be seeing this trend too, but I've noticed the last couple guests that we've had on have that kind of like narrative of like, what's the phrase, where you
Jack of all trades,
Mm-hmm.
master of none, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
where like I've been described as kind of the Swiss Army knife of the set. So there's a lot of producers who will bring me back because they know that like I either have it in my pack out kit, the thing that they need, or I'm smart enough to figure out something in every department because I produce, and that's how I was growing up. It's how I learned. But I don't like to advertise that I do so much because I felt like it hurt me more. But in recent interviews, I've started to see that kind of conversation shift away from like, instead of just focusing on one thing, maybe it's kind of smart to be good at more than one thing. And I'm not outright saying that they've said like, oh, don't know more than one thing. But typically it's like focus on one thing, stick with it, become the master of that. But I've also seen some industry regulars who I feel like I've had conversations with, especially recently, who are like, this is what I do and this is all I do. And like their pay has gotten worse over the years. That section's not growing. They don't really do anything else because they're like, no, I only do this. And I'm like, okay, well, maybe the reason why you're stuck is because you haven't tried something else, or you don't have skills into something else because you haven't allowed yourself to like grow out of that or learn out of that, you know. And that's also why we started this podcast, is I want to know everything that everyone does.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Which is different. I actually think that so many, not to speak ill of anybody, but I think so many older people in the industry, to a lot of my experience, they don't understand like all the pieces that go into the show always. I mean, unless it is your job to do so. I know a lot of people who, some people who are like maybe a writer who's been writing for a really long time, and they're fantastic at what they do, but they don't understand any of the other parts of the pieces of the puzzle. Which, look, you don't always have to. You really, really don't. And some people have been brought up kind of in the way that you say, of just like, being a master at your thing. But I will tell you, the best writers I've worked with are the ones that understand the other pieces of the puzzle, understand that this bit I've written is actually now going to be a heavy lift for the editors or for graphics department or for wardrobe or whatever. Having those awarenesses, so you realize when you come up with this bit, actually that might not be feasible. So I could be completely wasting my time here doing this. If I change this up a bit, make it a little bit more generic, like there have been jobs I've worked at in the past where people have written a comedy bit for someone so specific, like literally only one specific actor could do that job, like, and they have to say yes to it. And if they don't say yes, then it's completely gone, and that was it. However, if you look at other things where it's a bit more refillable, if you will, and it's like, okay, I have this, and I can think of 10 different actors who would be great at it, who can pitch it to a bunch of different people and hope it comes through. But if you've only written it for Tom Hanks, let's say, it's like, well, you might not go very far with the idea, because the likelihood of him saying no is so high. I usually experience something like that from writers who either haven't come through other departments or haven't experienced other worlds and got a good understanding of how it all works. As I said, it's not always a bad thing. There are incredible people who have only worked as writers their whole lives. But I also know some people who have come from other paths, and it blows my mind how good they are at what they do, because they make it easier on everyone else.
What I'm curious about is, you do have a lot of skill sets from before, writing, stand up, computer science, when you were drawing and animation. How do you feel like that helps you in your current job?
Well, when you get a 1.4 in computer science, it doesn't help you very much, honestly. That one's been shelved a little bit. But for the other pieces, it helps tremendously, because being in the room when you're putting together a show, and coming from all these different parts, the fact that I even look back at times and the roles that have taught me the most were honestly the roles in the very beginning. When I was a production assistant, when I was a runner, that taught me so much about every piece of the puzzle, not just etiquette, which is a huge part of it, as you two both know. How to handle yourself on set is something that really shouldn't be underestimated. A lot of people think it's super easy. It's just whatever. This is a workplace. It's super easy. A lot of people make it look very difficult to just be a good person on set. It doesn't come very naturally to them. There are a lot of wonderful people in this business. There are a lot of woeful people in this business, and I will say that bluntly. But I saw so many of those people when I was coming through, that there are people that made all the difference in my career because they treated me like a human being. They treated me like a fellow co-worker. They did not just treat me like a lackey who was there to refill the sodas in the fridge. They treated me like a person who they were working with, who they wanted to get to know and wanted to talk to. They made me feel valid. And that was absolutely huge. And then there were the people that made me feel so small, absolutely tiny, because like, who are you? You're just like the intern, whatever. I don't give a crap about you. Go and get my lunch, go do whatever. And you just feel like, why am I doing this? Why am I here to just be talked to like that? But all I told myself, like going all the way through, is like, I'm never going to be that person. I'm never going to allow myself to be that person. And I hope everyone in my generation that has come through on that ladder of, you know, the unpaid internships and all that sort of stuff, wants it to be different for the next people who came through. It's like that I felt this way, and I never want anyone else to feel like that. There was an internship, an unpaid internship I had in Los Angeles, where it was unpaid, but that was totally the norm for the time. Obviously, it wasn't illegal or anything like that. It was even at a place where the host of the show was like, I can't believe that we get this many people to do it, because it's like, it's such a compliment that, you know, people just want to do this for free. Like, are you crazy? Like, you're just doing this for college credit? And it's like, yes, because I love this so much and I want to learn like from you. But the first 3 weeks of that, I didn't tell anybody I worked with on this, because it was an unpaid internship moving down to Los Angeles, very expensive place. I was sleeping in my car. And I didn't tell my family that. I didn't tell, and I know I'm not really unique in this business. I know a lot of people have slept in their cars, vans, even if they have that much, crashing on couches, all this sort of stuff to get by. But that sort of stuff actually taught me the most, because that is, you know, that's when you're so hungry. And you're so both like hungry in the business and literally starving because you have no money and you're sleeping in your car. But that taught me everything. It was, and I remember I kept telling myself when I was there, like, don't lose this fire. Don't become jaded by this. You wanted to get into this and you are here and your foot is in the door. Don't let it slip. And there was a point in my career where it did slip. It did slip for a little bit. And I had to go back home, and I was bartending for about 4 years. And I kind of thought my career was over, because I thought all the connections were going to go cold. That was it. That was fun. And, you know, maybe I'll end up managing a bar someday, which, you know, yeah, nothing wrong with it at all. You know, working in the service, I was very much enjoying working in the service industry, but it was also that sort of grounding feeling of like, well, I didn't expect it to go this way. Like this is not where I expected to be, but here we are. And I'm totally grateful for those people that took me on board at the time and, you know, gave me, a paycheck when I needed it. I love them so much for it. But I kind of thought it was all over. And then after 4 years of doing that, randomly, a camera guy from the first news job I ever worked, John, he reached out and was like, hey, there's NBC Sports are coming to town to do the opening game of the Seahawks season, and they just need a runner for a couple of days. Are you down? And it was such a like, whoa, he remembers me from 4 years ago. So I must have made some kind of impression here. And immediately I'm like, yes, of course I will, because this is my foot back in. Like, I'm not letting this go. The boss I met that day, this was nearly 10 years ago now. The boss I met that day is my boss now. Like, I've been to other jobs and dotted around and stuff, and we've like reunited in this job, because this industry is just that small. And anyone who says that, they think like, it can't be that small. It's absurdly small, because once a show goes away, everybody scatters and goes and works on something else, and you just reunite once again. So I would say like the production assistant stuff, really, that taught me more than anything, because that taught me about the hunger, that taught me about the drive, that taught me about having to fight to get everything that you want in this business. Because, you know, not to babble on, it's kind of my thing, but what we do in this business is we fight and we scrape and we claw. And especially if you're someone like myself, who I had no connections to this business whatsoever starting out. I just wanted to do this and dreamed of doing this. That is no disrespect to the people that have a dad who was a DP or whatever. You know, what you want to do is what you want to do. That's totally fine. But for those people that don't have the access, it's incredibly difficult to get that start. And I realize, as a white English straight guy in the business, I've got a lot less hurdles than a lot of other people too. So to me, I'm like, it was very, very hard for me, but I am nowhere near the person that has had it the hardest trying to get here. So I never want it to be that hard for anybody, but I know there are so many people that have got it so much harder. So the production assistant thing taught me everything. And I think if you didn't come through that path and you kind of got that golden staircase into the path you wanted to be, it shows. You know the people who haven't come from doing the grunt work. You really, really do. So I would say the production assistant stuff really made me who I am now.
Hey, film industry folks, Deji here from the Lot1 Podcast. We've got big news. You can now be a VIP member of our film-loving family by joining our Patreon page. Get early access to episodes, exclusive behind-the-scenes content, and connect with fellow filmmakers. Your support means so much to us, and it helps us keep the reel rolling. Head on over to patreon.com/the Lot1 Podcast, and let's make movie magic together. Thanks for being a part of the Lot1 Podcast journey. I do have a question about, you said that there was a period of time where you did spend the 4 years outside of the industry, that we sometimes can go out of it and then find our way back in. But I actually wanted to know, what was it that made you want to leave in the first place?
I didn't want to leave. I'll be honest. I didn't want to leave. It was a circumstance where I had to go back and be with my family for a while. And I've always described it as the easiest and hardest decision I ever had to make, because I was offered the opportunity to continue work in the place where I was at that I wanted so, so badly. And I knew I had to say no. I knew I literally had to say no to it. And it killed me to do it, because you felt like, I did it. I'm here. This opportunity isn't going to come around again and again and again. You've worked so hard to get here. But I had no choice. And so I respectfully, turned it down, told them the situation. They fully understood, and went back and didn't really know how long I was going to need to step away from it, because also, like, my family and stuff, they were in Seattle. And Seattle is a very, it's a wonderful, wonderful city, but not with a huge TV and film industry. It's kind of in Vancouver and Portland, around it. So it's not like there was a ton of opportunity to pick up work. There were bits here and there. So when I came back to Seattle, my wonderful friend Sean knew I was coming back and needed some work, and he was losing a bartender at his bar who was moving away. And he was like, do you want to come and work for me for a while you get back on your feet? I was like, Sean, I have no idea how to make a drink. He's like, I've never poured a drink in my life.
Yeah.
There you go. And he said, no, but you can talk to people. You can talk to people, and you know how to deal with people. And he said, that's the job. If you could do that, I can teach you how to make a drink. And that kind of stuff has actually stayed with me in my career, because even when I started writing in the business, there was someone who told me, I remember it was a show where I felt like, I don't really know how to write for this show. It's not really my style. And they'd said to me, it was like, doesn't matter. Are you funny? If you're not funny, I can't teach you how to be funny. I can teach you how to write for this show. I cannot teach you how to be funny. So if you don't have that innate thing inside of you, I can't teach you. And that was kind of the bartending thing. It was like, you know how to be a bartender. You know how to talk to people. I can teach you how to pull the taps. Don't worry about it. I had no choice, but still always wanted to step back into the industry however I could. That was really when I started doing stand-up a lot more heavily, because the schedule sort of allowed for it. So I would do it, especially, if you're doing a late stand-up show and you don't have a bartending shift until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's great. It's fantastic. It's a perfect schedule. So I got to do that a little bit more. And then even when I actually started doing the TV work and that Seahawks game came up and things like that, wasn't my career changed in that moment. I was hired for a week and then wouldn't hear anything for 3 weeks. And then I'd get hired for another gig and then wouldn't hear anything for 3 weeks. And the bar was incredibly understanding of like, you need this week, like, go do it. That's the thing you want to do. That's awesome. So it was kind of a blessing in a way. And as much as that time sucked, honestly, like the time that having to step away from it all, I kind of wouldn't change it because of everything that's happened since.
Yeah.
Everything happens for a reason.
It does. It does. It really does. But just to a lot of people who maybe feel bad, it takes a long time for you to realize it at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, but now you're everyone's favorite person at a after party after you wrap filming, right? Because you know how to make all the drinks.
You do know how to make a good drink. You know where all the good bars are. You know how to schmooze the people. Get yourself some freebies, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, everybody's friend. Mm-hmm.
So I kind of want to get into your, you started working at a late night show. What show was this?
My first one was Conan.
What is sort of like the format? Like what happens there? Like how does the job work?
Chaos in the best way. Like it is absolute chaos in the best way. I can't even describe how much I loved being there, because I just remember every moment so vividly. That place, you go in. Like a lot of shows you might work on, if you're working on a sitcom or something like that, maybe it's a little bit predictable. You know how the day goes. You know you've got your table read. You know what time the actors get there. You know generally how the season's going to work, the arc of the characters and all this thing. Working on a late night show, day to day, you often have no idea what the next day is going to hold. Like you might have a guest booked for the next day, sure, and you know that piece is coming in, but you don't know what the funny is going to be. You don't know what the jokes you're going to do are, because even the shows that aren't political specifically, which of course in recent years we've really steered a lot more in a heavily political direction, the shows that aren't, they're still kind of responding to what's going on in pop culture, what's going on throughout the world. So you really can't plan too far in advance. And I love that feeling of constantly being on your toes. I hate predictability. I hate monotony. I love being challenged. So that environment, walking in there on... first off, that was on the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank, which if ever anyone who wants to work in the business ever gets the opportunity to work on like a studio lot in LA, that is like it's a theme park. It's like the coolest experience to have, because you are on this security guarded campus that you get let in because you work there, where your studio's here, and then across the street from you is like Big Bang Theory and all those guys, and you see them rolling in and out, and then 2.5 Men's over here and they're doing their thing. Oh, by the way, they're shooting the new Batman movie over here and they're doing their thing. The episode where the stage where they filmed all the episodes of Friends is over here, and they got a big plaque for that. And then like Ellen was recording down the way, and so you'd see all these guests for her show, like the biggest guests in the world. You'd be lining up for a coffee and like Bill Clinton would come by and you'd be like, what Starbucks am I in? Like, this is crazy. But that place was bizarre in the best way. And walking around this studio lot where like there are literally scenes from all these movies. My girlfriend taught me about this. I didn't know about it till years later, but like Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls, literally like that set, like you're driving a golf cart through and you see the town square. And one time, and I was telling her about it, she was like, "That Stars Hollow." I'm like, "What Stars Hollow?" She's like, "I'm going to break up with you if you don't know what that is." But those things were so cool. But the job itself, getting in there, everyone having this energy. Like if you had a negative energy in that place, you kind of didn't survive, because you had to you had to do a fun show, and you had to
It's
be
comedy.
joyful people. Yeah, it's comedy. Like you can do that. Honestly, you can do that in news. You can be grumpy in news because half of what you're experiencing is just so dark and painful at times that it's often hard to be cheery. But in comedy, you've got to be uplifted. You've got to be like enjoying being there. I don't know one person who didn't enjoy every second of being there, including the man himself.
And what were you doing?
So I was literally an intern there when I first when I first started out. That was just an internship, working at this wonderful, wonderful place. And it was kind of, my catalyst in this business. That it was, I'd come from an internship in local news before that. And then I got this internship at, national huge show, working for this comedy icon who I'd loved in the UK for so long. And he was an incredible person to work for. And the only thing I can say about like a lot of the comedy that's put together on that show is all those sort of like backstage bits that you know so well from Conan. The amount of that stuff that is truly just, it just came to him that day or in that moment or whatever it was. And you just go and get some cameras and we're just going to start taping on this because we've got this ridiculous idea. This is kind of funny. Let's record it. And we just see where it goes. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But with that guy, more often than not, it works. And you'd be walking through the hallways and suddenly you've accidentally walked into a bit. And he may be dragging you into it. He's quizzing you. He's got his glasses on and his clipboard out, like interviewing you about something. And you're like, what's happening? Why are you doing this to me? But it was sensational. Like it was such a cool experience and environment because that was everything I ever wanted to do in TV. That summed up everything I ever wanted to do in TV. I've only ever wanted to make people smile. I've only ever wanted to make people who are having a hard day feel like, they can go to sleep feeling better about themselves and what's going on in the world and just forget about the nonsense and just have fun. Like that was all I ever wanted to do. There are plenty of shows I've worked at that take themselves too seriously, and I'll be honest, you can not accuse Conan of taking himself too seriously. He has never done that, and he projects that onto others. It's wonderful.
So you were an intern,
and
then from intern, were you like? I'm assuming. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Obviously, you will. What were you doing as an intern? And then how did that lead to whatever was next? And what was next?
As an intern, I was actually helping write. I was a monologue intern. So I got very, very lucky. Me and two other interns, myself, Jake Matera and Ashley Morgan, we got selected to be monologue interns, which we didn't even know about when we first got the internship. Like that kind of wasn't an option right away. You're sort of all brought on as generic production interns. And then after a couple of weeks, they almost start like assigning you off to a department based on your interests, your strengths. So there's talent interns, there's digital interns, there's script interns, there's monologue interns, all this stuff. And there was almost like a test for people who wanted to be a monologue intern. And it was basically about looking through and pitching joke premises. And you would go through the daily news and it would kind of be split into topical, so really kind of political and things that had happened the day before, focused on that. And then the more evergreen stuff. So that would be more a scientific study has found this, that, or the other. And you would be combing through to come up with all these premises. And they did this kind of test to sort of who got it, who
did you get higher than a 1.4?
I did get higher than a 1.4. I did, but that is a good joke premise right there. So I did well enough. They selected me and I felt so fortunate. Love doing it. Got to, work with the writers quite a bit more, learned so much from them. These incredible writers like Laurie Kilmartin, Rob Cutner, Dion Cole, all these great people who, it's a long list of people, Matt O'Brien, who I can only say incredible things about. And you're basically, because in Conan's format, as Fallon still kind of does this, it's not as much the same as like Colbert and stuff. It's almost that like set up punchline kind of style joke that Carson have made so famous. And you're like basically going to these guys, set up, and it's up to them to knock it out the park. But the big part of the job is realizing, one, don't give them a setup where the joke is already in the setup. Like if the joke's already there, it's hard to make a joke on a joke.
What's an example of that?
There was one I pitched at one point where I think I can't remember exactly what was said, but I remember David Cross, the incredible comedian, a lot of people know as Tobias from Arrested Development. He did an interview where, and this was one of my pitches in the test, actually. He did an interview because I think he was in one of the Alvin and the Chipmunks movies. And he did an interview he was on a press junket and said, it's the worst movie you're ever going to see in your life. Like he was like, this is the stupidest thing. I regret doing it, blah, blah, blah. And like, this is on a press. I'm like, that is the funniest thing. You are getting paid to get out there to do it. And I remember pitching that one of just saying, like David Cross being out there and doing this. And it was, the boss at the time, Erin Martin, she pulled me aside and was just like, look, your pitches were great. My only note is like this one. It's like the joke is already in that premise. Like that is the joke. It's hard to put a punchline on the back of it. I was like, I get it. And there's a few other ones of those where it can be very tricky if it's already,
in there,
baked into the premise. So it was a lot of those and a lot of like quite a few political ones, but Conan wasn't as heavily political as some others now. So a lot of the silly scientific studies, Florida Man did this sort of stories that were very, very fun to find. And that was kind of our day. We would start out the day getting as many out as we could before the writers' meeting at, I think it was like 10 a.m. Get as many out as you could before that. So we'd have a little flurry of those. And then we'd do another batch that we'd be trying to get in for like one for when they did like read down and that stuff. And then we'd almost be on like emergency joke premises at the end of the day, because after you pitch all those and they've tagged on the jokes to the end of it, probably about 100 monologue jokes. I may be overestimating, it's been a while, but I think about 100 monologue jokes would get pitched to Conan. Like he would receive, here's 100 monologue jokes. And some of them he's written and, he's said, I love this premise, let's do this. Some of them he's come up with a joke entirely, but he's getting pitched them and he'll go through them and he will say like, no, this premise doesn't work. No, or there's something here, but that's not the punchline. And some days it would just be like, guys, I don't like any of these. Like we need something else. And so you'd almost be at DEFCON 1 of like, the audience is loading in. What are we doing? Like we don't have a monologue right now. Oh my God, like more jokes. And then some days we're drowning in jokes. We've got like 30 monologue jokes and he loves them all. And we use that on another day. That's great.
Hey, unlock exclusive interviews, explore diverse roles in the film industry, and join the cinematic journey on our Patreon at patreon.com/Lot1 Podcast. So you're an intern. What did that lead you to?
So that was actually when I was offered an opportunity to move on to another show after that, and sadly couldn't accept it.
That's when that happened.
That was that time.
Oh man, that would have been rough.
Got you. Now I'm seeing the timeline. Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was kind of an offshoot show. It wasn't on Conan. There was like a spin-off show that was happening, and I was in conversations on a role on that and had to kind of like back away. But like if to speed past all that, then after that was actually me working in sports, and it was truly kind of doing, I don't want to say grunt work because that almost seems so unappreciative, but it kind of was, you're out there, you're you're grabbing coffees for talent, you're building production offices, you're going out to the store. I think one of my favorite things I learned doing that was like you're buying TVs from Costco that you're returning 2 days later because you need a monitor.
I haven't done that before. No.
Guys, that's just not the TV I want. Do you want store credit? No, just put it back on the card, please.
Yeah.
All that kind of thing where all these stores just absolutely hate you. But that came to me, and then I've always loved sports. And so being able to do that, I was like, okay, I didn't really expect myself to be doing this. But I think that's what it all came down to. And this is advice I love to give people starting out in this business. If someone comes up to me and says something like, oh, I dream of working for Saturday Night Live. Great. Good for you. I hope all your dreams come true. I really do. However, if you only dream of working for Saturday Night Live and nothing else will do, I don't think you're going to go very far in this game. You've got to go into this because you love the medium. Because something like Saturday Night Live, it's been around for 50 years now. It's not going to be around forever, though. There's not a lot of shows that are going to be around forever. So if you love it, whether you're working on a show like a Succession, or you're working on a show like What We Do in the Shadows, or you're working on a reality TV show, or a late night show, or Sesame Street, or a new type of show we haven't even thought of yet. If you would work on any of those because you just love doing it, I mean, seriously, I would love to work on Sesame Street. That'd be so freaking cool. But you're like, yeah, that's the love of the business at the end of the day. Like, you have to love the industry rather than like the show or the one thing.
Right.
And fight for it. Go for it. Give it everything you've got to maybe get there one day. But you don't know what the path is. No one's path is the same. You may sort of stumble into it and meet the right person at some point along the way who sort of drags you over that way, and wonderful. That might not happen, and you fall into another thing that you love and you're on another incredible show. You wanted to work at Sesame Street, but now you're at the Muppets. Okay, I think you still did pretty well.
Yeah. That actually reminds me of talking about the writers who, let's say they write a screenplay for Tom Hanks or whatever, right? And Tom Hanks is the only person that'll do it. Same sort of mindset, right? And I think that's really just based off of the idea of the film industry instead of the actual film industry itself. Like when I was a kid, pretending to be Spider-Man, swinging through my house, I didn't know that like YouTube was going to be a thing. I didn't know, like, that wasn't even a thing that happened.
Even stuff like a laugh track sitcom is something I was thinking about not too long ago. Like, we grew up on all these laugh track sitcoms that are now seemingly dead. Like, I can barely think of a new laugh track sitcom.
Like, they're just remnants of or like spin-offs of ones that were big like 10 years ago.
But most of them have sort of gone into the more 21st century no laugh track sort of style that I remember when that first happened, when I was growing up, when those shows sort of first started appearing. It was really weird, and people were like, oh, this is so avant-garde and like dark humor and stuff, and now it's just like the norm. It seems like, oh, that's what a comedy's supposed to be. Don't tell me when to laugh. So people who may have dreamed on working on like a Friends or something like that, it's like, well, I don't know how many of those there are around anymore. So it is crazy. You have to move with the industry.
I know we're getting close to the end here. I have a question, but I think I'll save it for the after show.
I love the tease.
The audience,
Chris, you get to ask your very special.
My favorite. Okay, you ready? It's a big question. I don't know if you can handle it. All right. If you had one piece of advice to give a listener, piece of advice for someone who wants to go on a late night show,
I would say it's a pressure cooker. It's a pressure cooker that can really test your mettle. A late night show is one of these places where you watch it at home and it's wonderful, it's fun, it's fantastic. But especially in the current climate, you have to remember a lot of what they're responding to, making fun of the State of the Union or a debate or whatever it is. There's a lot of sort of mental beat down that comes with it, that it takes a certain sort of character to be able to get through that. And it's not for a lot of people. There are a lot of people who dream of writing comedy who kind of realize that's not the sort of comedy I want to write. Again, late night in the 90s and stuff was more irreverent. And now a lot of it is the top shows are very present in the news cycle. So you have to be able to deal with that in the current climate, because to our point that we were making before, it could all change again. It will all change again. The landscape of the late night industry will all change again, but we don't know exactly when that is. Ultimately, you have to always remember that you need to be having fun doing what you do. If it ever reaches the point in your job where you sort of reach this place where you realize, I don't think I'm having fun doing this anymore, because maybe the newsiness of it is just hitting me so hard, there are other places for you to pursue your craft. And that's no issue. That's no slight at the show. That's no slight at you. You just have to find the right place where you fit. And for a lot of people, obviously the people who do work in late night and have for many, many years, they are in the right place for them. And I'm so, so happy for them. But I feel all people should always have their head on a swivel and realize that there always could be something more. There always could be something else. And I think the piece of advice I've given to people as you look at shows literally look at Conan. Conan went away, the show went with it. So people who dreamed of working for the Late Late Show, that doesn't exist anymore. It's turned into, After Midnight, and it's a totally different show. So that's another example of, you have to love this medium and you have to love doing every single piece of it. But I love late night so much still. And I would just say to people, just soak up every single second of it and enjoy every single moment of it. But if it's not for you, that's okay. That's okay. You're allowed to go and find where you do fit in this crazy TV puzzle.
Thanks. Nice. Spitting wisdom.
Oh, yeah. I'm glad that was a good answer.
For those people who, are itching to get more information about you, maybe learn about your podcast, which we didn't talk about on this podcast. I'm going to save that for the after show. But where can they find you?
They can find me all over social media. My handle is Full of Gleeson. So my last name, Full of Gleeson. I'm all over social media. That's where I post, where I'm doing new shows, my podcast, all that kind of stuff. And often even sharing tips and advice on the industry, however I can. So that is where you can find me. I would love to see you if you want to give us a follow. The name of the podcast is called Last First Day with Billy Gleeson. Last First Day. And if you're wondering, that's an interesting name for a podcast. What's that all about? Well, I'll tell you on the after show, won't I?
There you go.
There it is.
Thank you so much, Billy, for joining us on this show and, just giving us your experiences and the lessons you've learned along the way. It's really, I think, audience is really going to like that.
Well, thank you both. You both host a wonderful podcast. It was so great to be able to chat with you. Thank you for thinking of me, and thank you for taking the time with me.
Of course. Thank you for coming. I hope the audience enjoyed it as much as we did. And we have so many more questions for you in that after show.
Yeah.
Let's do it. Oh,
I'm
going to reveal so much. Oh, I've been holding back all the good stuff. I've been holding back all the good.
No,
folks.
the Earl Grey has been spilled.
It is. It's all over me. It's all over me, and it's coming out in the after show.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
All right, that's a wrap for today's Lot1 Podcast. Huge thanks to our sponsor, FreeMe. Remember to use the discount code FreeMeLot1 for 25% off the annual subscription. Again, the discount code is FreeMeLOT and the number 1 at checkout for your exclusive deal. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed that episode, subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast, and leave a review and share it with your cousin, because it really helps others find us. Big shout out to our producer, Mina Vazarian, and our editor, Carlos Luna. MVPs! And if you're not a part of our exclusive Patreon community yet, head on over to patreon.com/the Lot1 Podcast for early access, bonus content like the after show, and much more. Also, I want to give a quick shout out to our incredible Patreon supporters. Your backing keeps the Lot1 Podcast lights on. Connect with us on Instagram and TikTok at the Lot1 Podcast. That is the LOT, the number 1, and podcast for behind the scenes content and updates. We're now accepting listener mail. So if you got any questions for our guests or even us, drop us a line. Also, if you're interested in finding out more about Lot1 Productions and all we've got going on, check us out at lot1productions.com. Until next time, keep those creative fires burning, dream big, and remember the filmmaking journey is a ride worth taking. See you next week.